We're taking a look back at the biggest political turning points, trends, and controversies as we hit rewind on Rising. We've got the power players, scandals, and outrageous decisions that have defined our conversations. The news of slain conservative activist Charlie Kirk's death has rocked the political world. Condolences are pouring in from the left and the right. Yesterday, the House held a moment of silence for Kirk. Now, after that moment, lawmakers then descended into a shouting match. Let's watch.
Let's wait a minute. The House will be in order. The House will be in order. Shh. The House will be in order.
Meanwhile, some lawmakers have been quick to place the blame on others besides the shooter. Republican Representatives Nancy Mace and Anna Paulina Luna blamed Democrats for the incident, but Democratic Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker has differing views on the matter. Let's watch.
Political violence, unfortunately, has been ratcheting up in this country. We saw the shootings, the killings in Minnesota. I think there are people who are fomenting it in this country. I think the president's rhetoric often foments it. We've seen the January 6th rioters who clearly, have tripped a new era of political violence. And the president, what did he do? He pardoned them.
Meanwhile, Fox's Greg Gutfeld broke from conservatives with a surprising take. Let's take a look.
We don't know who did this, but I do know it doesn't help the left, which makes me think, is it the left? I don't know. We don't know. But it feels professional. That's all it feels to me.
Despite what his colleague said, Fox's Jesse Waters had stronger words following Kirk's death. Let's look at that.
They are at war with us. Whether we want to accept it or not, they are at war with us. And what are we going to do about it? How much political violence are we going to tolerate? And everybody's accountable, and we're watching what they're saying on television and who's saying what. The politicians, the media, and all of these rats out there. This can never happen again. It ends now.
He followed up his remarks with this.
We're angry and we're resolute, and we're going to avenge Charlie's death in the way Charlie would want it to be avenged.
Meanwhile, MSNBC is being skewered for analyst Matthew Dowd's comments. Here are those words.
Saying these awful words and not expect awful actions to take place.
Matt.
And that's the unfortunate environment we're in.
Now, Dowd has since been let go from the network, and MSNBC has issued an apology.
Authorities are now saying they have recovered a bolt-action rifle and that they have images of the suspect, which is very welcome news, obviously, because we hope that person is apprehended and brought to justice. I have confidence in law enforcement that that will be the case, although it was obviously dismaying when two different people were initially questioned and then released. They were not the individual, the suspect.
I think that, though, really quick speaks to even FBI Director Kash Patel wanting to just get the information out. There is a honorable thing about trying to be super transparent immediately with the American public, but also the fact that we're saying, oh, okay, we have somebody and then they're let go and this is an innocent person, or we saw the old man be taken down, it's not the person. There just is a lot of, and I know he's like a career, you told me earlier, a career protester.
The old man that was in some of the videos who was talked to by the police, my understanding is he is someone who shows up to a lot of.
But he doesn't deserve to be arrested
protests.
if he didn't do anything, if he protests.
No, I think his thing is that he tries to get arrested for, not for trespass, that he's not he has nothing to do with this.
Right. Yeah.
So the reactions from all these people, so I always say, because the temptation, and I see it, to blame political rhetoric for killings happening is something that clearly right and left, it just appeals to them to do. Obviously, I've heard Donald Trump and J.D. Vance blame left-wing rhetoric for attempted violence against Republican figures. We just heard J.B. Pritzker there blaming conservative rhetoric for Democrats being targeted, or everything is about January 6th. Words do not kill people, and political rhetoric has always been provocative. It was provocative in the days of the founding of our country. So the connection, in my view, between heated political rhetoric and actual violence is not nearly as well substantiated as many people like to claim it is. Responsibility for violence lies with that person. And we have free speech in this country. Charlie Kirk believed as strongly as anyone in free speech in the First Amendment. He believed in debate. He used strong language to say what he thinks. I think that person on MSNBC who said that he somehow deserved to get shot because he used heated rhetoric that is absolutely appalling, and MSNBC has parted ways with that person, and good riddance. But it is used as an excuse for a censorship agenda in so many cases, and both sides do this, and I'm opposed to it.
And I think even everybody, as you played those sound bites, I totally agree with you. But even as I heard Jesse Waters speaking, the they versus us idea, that there is like this coalition of people that disagree with you politically that want you dead is not actually a thing, because when you conflate all the issues that happen, right? Some of them, like you said, have been pointed to specific political violence, like in Minnesota, but then other ones, like you said with Gabby Giffords, haven't actually been pointed directly to saying this is because somebody hated you politically. So we need to talk about the broader issue, which can
Contrary
be debated.
to what everyone said at the time, mainstream in New York Times, later, even years later, and all commentators said this was because of out of control Tea Party, right-wing, anti-government rhetoric.
But even let's use the Trump assassination attempt. So that's what I mean. People just try to find a moment to say, "Oh, you created this temperature in this country." I think there's validity to have a conversation about releasing people who have aggressively attacked an institution, our Capitol, on January 6th, and Republicans needing to respond to why releasing those people from jail was appropriate and pardoning them. But that's a separate conversation, I think, from saying that everybody who commits violent acts that may or may not be politically affiliated is all tied to one. I think that's the easy way out, rather than pointing to criminals and having real debate about topics. Because, I have at least the discernment to understand that if I do disagree with somebody politically completely and fully, I do not ever wish death upon them. I do not ever wish any harm to them in any way. I wish they come to the table and have a conversation, come to Rising, come to any show, or go out there and have a discussion about it. And people are really riled up. And I think what the MSNBC commentator was alluding to was the fact that, there's been conversations about how to handle gun control in this country around the Second Amendment. And he was very vocal about saying that he, few lives, and you've seen this clip if you guys are online and active, of him saying in the past, Charlie Kirk, that if somebody has to die to protect the Second Amendment, well, then someone has to die. He said that. That's a quote that he said while speaking. And so people are like, other people who have lost lives who heard that were probably deeply offended by that statement, just like your family is getting deeply offended by this idea. And so I don't think it's appropriate to bring that conversation up now, but the conversation around gun rights has to come into play, even as a family and a household with a gun. You know what I mean? I understand, and a partner from Texas, I understand the relevance of the Second Amendment, right? And so that's the thing. I think that there needs to be more of a discussion about how you deal with families that are reeling from these school shootings, how you deal with individuals that are reeling from all these shootings.
My argument for that rhetoric should not be blamed honestly applies basically equally to guns themselves. They don't shoot themselves. Someone uses them or misuses them. I'm not going to, like Charlie Kirk, I don't believe in disarming lawful Americans, because some people, a weapon, a suspected weapon was just recovered. I am not like a firearms expert, but given the weapon that was recovered and the distance the shot was made, this is going to, this is not a, why are people allowed to easily purchase, guns of mass destruction? This is going to be a hunting type weapon that would only be prohibited under the strictest kind of gun control regime that would never be constitutional in this country. So I'm not really sure a gun control conversation is going to be so relevant here. I mean, obviously, we haven't even apprehended the person yet,
we don't know
how
all the
gun
details.
was obtained legally or not legally. I think, I'm not someone who really tends to focus on the means of the kill. Charlie Kirk made himself extremely accessible to the people, to students, to college students. I don't know what level of security would have been needed to
But
stop
another
someone
issue for me
dedicated
is
to
the security.
killing him.
So at a college campus with an attendance expectation of 3,000 people, the fact that one student I read on NBC yesterday said it's just a scannable QR code to get in, it's pretty much opening. I know he had his own security
we're a free
there.
society. I mean, we're a high trust free society.
I know, but they can
where
wind
there's-
people down, and I understand the shooter was likely
he's
on a
on a
rooftop
roof.
that far away, but it's still like there were no protections in place to even make sure the people in the building didn't have bad actions, knowing that you got 1,000 voices on campus that said they didn't want them there, which is overwhelming for a smaller university compared to, like, let's say, a humongous. I think, there could have been more protections in place. I don't know that because the way that President Trump has responded to this.
Trump's the president, so there should be more security for him. But
no, but I'm getting to a point that the way that President Trump responded to this, Congress took a moment of silence, lowering the flags half-staff on the 14th. These are all major investments saying that he is a political figure of note. And so if a political figure of note is heading to a college campus in the same way that they sweep the area for any other political figure of note, because the argument has been that he's not actually in Congress, right? So fine, he was a political figure of note. When do we start to think about how to protect those people if he means that much to the president of the United States, who's the most powerful man, arguably, in the country/world?
Yeah, in response to this, you're sure we might have to discuss what level of security will now be necessary for anyone of this, of a commentator of this kind of status, or whether these kinds of outdoor, because this is an outdoor speaking event where you could have someone on a roof, 150 yards away, whether maybe that is not how things are going to be done anymore. I mean, I don't like to do, Patriot Act style mass security in response to things like this. But obviously, if we don't want this to start becoming a trend, so maybe it is appropriate. I don't know. I don't think, my point is, unlike the Trump case, where it seemed where there were real failings by the Secret Service, and because it's the president, and you're supposed to also have all those roofs looked at.
Right.
In this case, I'm not sure it would have been reasonable to expect a level of sweeping security that would have protected him from this kind of thing.
And you just don't want anyone trying to blame anybody other than, like, don't blame security, don't look into it.
Right.
I mean, these conversations are
They can be
naturally
looked
going
at,
to unfold, but look at the first, let's capture the criminal and start there.
I mean, there's members of, we live in Washington, D.C. You see members of Congress. I've seen members of the Senate, on the streets, walking around. I live in an area of the city where there are a lot of them. It's not, they are not moving like in a force field at all times, because because this is thankfully a rare kind of thing, but is it getting less rare, and do we have to rethink our approach? Is definitely conversations we're going to be having in the coming days, weeks, and months. Next up, the U.S. is once again on the brink of a government shutdown. Coming up, what Democrats say needs to happen in order to avoid it. Attorney General Pam Bondi is vowing to target anyone who is engaged in, quote, hate speech in the wake of Charlie Kirk's death.
Now, Bondi is facing heat from across the spectrum over her comments. Here she is on Katie Miller's podcast yesterday.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie, in our society.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people, so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you, if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything, and that's across the aisle.
Fox News' Britt Hume wrote on X, someone needs to explain to Ms. Bondi that so-called hate speech, repulsive though it may be, is protected by the First Amendment. She should know this. Bondi, however, took to X to defend herself this morning. She wrote that hate speech that crosses into violence isn't protected by the First Amendment, and that the era of calls for assassinations and cheers for political violence are over.
Meanwhile, the suspects in Kirk's assassination, Tyler Robinson, is set to appear in court today. FBI Director Dan Bongino revealed that based on Robinson's digital footprint, he had, quote, an obsession with Charlie Kirk. Bongino also said that Robinson displayed multiple warning signs before the shooting. His coworkers, for instance, said that he detached himself when politics came up and would walk away. Here's the FBI Director Kash Patel on Hannity last night with more information on the suspect.
But I will say what was found in terms of information, a text message exchange, where the suspect specifically stated that he had the opportunity to take out Charlie Kirk and he was going to do that. And when he was asked why, he said some hatred cannot be negotiated with.
Moreover, the Washington Free Beacon's Aaron Sabarium's reporting that the FBI is investigating social media posts that appeared to have some sort of foreknowledge of the assassination. The Free Beacon writes, quote, the post, one of which referenced, the date of Kirk's assassination, September 10th, more than a month before it took place. They were all deleted in the days following the killing. Several of the accounts appear to belong to transgender individuals, and at least one of them did follow the suspect, Tyler Robinson's roommate, with whom Robinson was allegedly in a relationship on TikTok. So that is real interesting information. Now, I want to urge some caution here because I saw one of them, but was an account that says every day says something bad's going to happen to Charlie Kirk, something bad's going to happen to Donald Trump, something's bad. So if you say that every day, this is how magicians win in those little games where they'd say, does someone in the room have a relative whose name is John?
Starts with an L or
Right. It's law of probabilities. You eventually get there. Now, it could be, however, though, that the suspect, Tyler Robinson, talked about doing this with these people, transgender individuals. His roommate/lover is alleged to be a transitioning individual. So that's possible. And if people had foreknowledge, doesn't necessarily mean they were involved, although they cough had some duty to warn, although maybe they thought it was idle talk. Who knows? So definitely has to be looked into. Right. Could be less than meets the eye, is all I'm saying.
You, myself, and our producer, Louis, were talking about this yesterday, and I was like, oh my gosh, it's some fake account making it up. But I looked into it, and now that they're investigating, it actually is very scary. So I think that they should look at anybody that was connected, especially if they're following anybody related to the shooter, because that's something that you want to make sure that people are not complicit in this.
That would be too much
if he acted alone.
Coincidence.
It just seemed very coincidental, and stuff like that makes me uncomfortable. I think my bigger issue is even when you look at this and step back at every information that we have now, it's like people are still trying to connect this to this leftist ideology, and that's the bigger goal for them, rather than finding out if there are 5 people involved that helped him, 1 person, or figuring out what group to pin this on. So I think the more information that comes out about who he was dating, to me, matters more to people than why a killer killed someone. And I think that we have to just change the conversation into what this criminal did and prosecuting him to the further extent of the law, as opposed to how we can tie him so close to another political party. And the reason I say that is, if you remember, a decade ago when Dylann Roof shot all the black worshipers in South Carolina at the church, President Obama was there, and he did not tie any of those actions to the Republican Party. It's a leader's responsibility to, no, he didn't go up there after the shooting or even weeks after the shooting and say, this is Republicans' fault. We're seeing a lot of leadership.
Maybe he didn't. I saw plenty of assertions
I didn't ask
in mainstream
about
media that this is the fault of right-wing rhetoric or Fox News or all of that.
Well, he was trying to say that he was trying to, incite a race war with his actions because he feels that black people were taking over white people, again, space in this world, and having conversations like many politicians do that are about the great replacement theory, or that is happening in some form, including J.D. Vance, including Trump, including Marjorie Taylor Greene. Well, then that becomes uncomfortable. But at the same time, it's not their fault that Dylann Roof went in there and shot up those worshipers. That's a racist man who committed a crime. And so I think that we have to make sure we're differentiating when people do criminal acts and have major issues. We need to prosecute them to the fullest extent of our law and find a way to bring the country together to say we condemn this violence. We appreciate civil discourse, but we condemn this violence.
Well, and to what Pam Bondi there, what she was saying about hate speech, which was nonsense, and everyone called her out for it, including a lot of people on the right. I'm going to read a rebuttal to what she said. Hate speech does not exist legally in America. There's ugly speech, there's gross speech, there's evil speech, and all of it is protected by the First Amendment. Keep America free. You know who said that?
Who?
Charlie Kirk.
Wow.
So she got that one really wrong. And then when she said it's only, I just meant violent speech. Well, okay, specific threats of violence. If you say we should kill this person and here's how we're going to do it and when, that loses protection. That's what the Supreme Court has said. But just calls to overthrow the government, general, vague, harsh, violent rhetoric is not illegal or unconstitutional. So
and I found it odd that J.D. Vance went onto the podcast last night and hosted it and didn't find a way to try to bring people together and not say that the worst of us online that are saying these things are the worst of the country, but most people he's seeing are saying that was a terrible tragedy. And I think that was a moment for the vice president of our country to do something a little bit different, but also
he said no
not call to
unity
cancel.
with those who call for violence.
But also
That's
not,
what he
he's
said.
calling to cancel people on a platform where you're saying the man who created that platform wouldn't have called to cancel people. And those same people weren't called to be canceled that had somewhat or suggested racist that George Floyd needed to die. These same people should lose their job. If we're going to comb through everything negative that employers don't morally align with who they're hiring, we got to go through everything.
Well,
you can't start at Charlie Kirk.
Between saying like he calls for J.D. Vance, you can disagree with this, but J.D. Vance called for the cancellation of people who justified or glorified or celebrated violence. If people, I think the George Floyd.
Some people celebrated the violence from a police officer to that man.
Should have gotten killed, and it was good that he got killed. Yes, there's plenty of
negative comments under my post specifically to try to go and get them all. No, about he deserved to die. He's a drug addict. These are all things that I got on X, is what I'm saying.
I think what you got was, I could be wrong. I think what you got was pushback from the idea that it was the police officer's fault, which I don't agree with, or some criticism of his. I mean that he had multiple run-ins with law enforcement. He had threatened a woman, that kind of thing, is different from saying he should have died or that we're happy he died, which is what people said about Trump.
We're gonna have to talk about this more. I know we got to go. So the Trump administration confirming another deadly strike that was carried out on an alleged cartel boat. That's up next. Why some members of Congress are calling it an overreach from the executive branch.
Good morning, rise and shine, or rising and shine, I guess.
That's a good, let's change the name.
I've never said that, I don't think, not once in 5 years.
I'm bringing out the best in you, the sunshine and rainbows.
Yes, you are. Well, I'm glad to see you in such a positive mood. I know you had a harrowing journey back to our fair city.
It was a disaster. I'm just getting acclimated to D.C., and you missed one Amtrak. Acela Express cost $1 million.
She drove here from New York in the middle of the night.
I just drove in the middle of the night.
That's crazy.
It was ridiculous. But thank you to the Avis team that allowed me to get a car the same day in the middle of Manhattan.
Glad you made it.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here, and I'm delirious. Coming up on Rising, California Governor Gavin Newsom is taking action against masked ICE agents, but will the new bill be enforceable?
And plus, Governor Josh Shapiro is taking a jab at former President Kamala Harris.
And I'll be
Vice President, excuse me, not the President.
Yeah, and I'll be discussing how the right seems to be betraying their free speech principles when it comes to Jimmy Kimmel. But first, Robbie, what is on your radar today?
I have a similar subject that I'm addressing. Now, according to the latest news, as you just announced, Lindsay, Jimmy Kimmel is negotiating a return to late night after being yanked off the airwaves following his deplorable comments implying that Tyler Robinson, the alleged murderer of Charlie Kirk, was actually part of the MAGA gang. Of course, everything we've learned about Robinson suggests he was not himself part of MAGA. Rather, he allegedly killed Kirk because Kirk was MAGA. Kimmel should not have implied otherwise. He's not alone, of course. Incorrect notions about the suspect's political tribe have remained enduringly popular in liberal media circles. One of the top mainstream liberal Substack writers, Heather Cox Richardson, wrote last week that the motive of the alleged shooter remains unclear. This is simply not true. Interviews with Robinson's friends, family members, as well as text messages between Robinson and his roommate, his transgender romantic partner, paint a clear portrait of a man who found Kirk's conservative views harmful. Now, while Kimmel is a comedian rather than a newscaster, given how paranoid the mainstream media is about the spread of so-called misinformation, the criticism of Kimmel on this subject was well-deserved. And private businesses, private media companies, well, they're allowed to make decisions about their own programming and decide they don't want to employ, broadcast, or platform someone they disagree with or someone who's losing money because the audience doesn't like it. Free speech means freedom from government coercion. It does not mean freedom to say whatever you want on somebody else's dime. And so the decision to suspend Kimmel was made by ABC after Nexstar Media and Sinclair Broadcast Group decided not to air him on their local stations. In the interest of full disclosure, Nexstar is the parent company of The Hill, program you're watching. But here's the bigger issue. Again, it's fine to take Kimmel off the air. It's just not okay for the government to take Kimmel off the air. Unfortunately, the Federal Communications Commission, very unwisely in my view, decided to insert itself in this matter. Brendan Carr is chair of the FCC. Not only did he criticize what Kimmel had to say, he also implicitly pressured the broadcasters. Take a look what he said during an interview with conservative influencer Benny Johnson.
But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or, there's going to be additional work for the FCC. Again, there's actions that we can take on licensed broadcasters. And frankly, I think that it's really sort of past time that a lot of these licensed broadcasters themselves push back.
We can do this the easy way or the hard way. It's not an idle threat. The FCC licenses broadcast channels and can fine them or even take them off the air. The FCC can make life very difficult for companies that defy it. So I'll say it once again. Private companies have the right to determine their programming as they see fit. And a washed-up comedian telling lame jokes about a subject he is clearly misinformed on for a declining number of viewers as part of a media format that is antiquated and perpetually losing money is not a recipe for riveting television, in my humble opinion. Letting Kimmel and the rest of the late-night crowd go extinct is perfectly fine. It's a business decision. But it is not the FCC's decision. As Glenn Greenwald put it, I couldn't have said it better myself, this shouldn't be a complicated or difficult dichotomy to understand. Jimmy Kimmel is repulsive, but the state has no role in threatening companies to fire on-air voices it dislikes or who the state believes is spreading disinformation, which is exactly what happened here. Moreover, the Trump administration's actions are functionally equivalent to the Biden administration's attacks on private social media companies, which caused numerous free speech infringements during the COVID-19 pandemic. Recall that President Biden, who accused Facebook of killing people when it declined to censor anti-vaccine content, as well as his comm staffers, were likely motivating factors behind a whole host of regrettable moderation decisions made by Facebook at the behest of the White House, the CDC, and other government agencies. When federal employees use the threat of regulation, fines, and other forms of punishment to induce private companies into self-censorship, it's known as jawboning. That's the term. Now, whether this practice violates the First Amendment, which constrains the government's ability to restrict speech, that's not entirely a settled matter. In Murphy v. Missouri, the Supreme Court declined to rule that the Biden administration had violated the First Amendment rights of social media users. The case is also known as Missouri v. Biden. The majority decision, however, had to do with standing and did not actually address the arguments of the plaintiffs. Many free speech scholars rightly believe that the First Amendment rights of private media companies and their users will not be protected until and unless the court makes clear that this sort of behavior from federal bureaucrats, jawboning, is wrong. Ironically, FCC Chair Carr has strongly denounced jawboning in the past and in general been a strong supporter of the First Amendment rights. He frequently called out the Biden administration for engaging in this very practice, writing in August of 2022, "This is very concerning. The government does not evade the First Amendment's restraints on censoring political speech by jawboning a company into suppressing it. Rather, that conduct runs headlong into those constitutional restrictions, as Supreme Court law makes clear." There's simply no way to square this circle. If it's wrong for the Biden administration to pressure social media companies to serve the public interest as defined by Biden and censor fraud content, then it's wrong for the Trump administration to pressure broadcasters to enforce a Trump-defined public interest. Don't just take my word for it. Senator Rand Paul and Senator Ted Cruz, they both agree with me. Cruz said the FCC's actions here were dangerous as hell. That's a direct quote from him. That all conservatives should oppose the FCC trying to pressure companies to make editorial decisions of this kind. And Paul said the following.
You can be fired for not being popular also. I mean, this is television, for goodness sakes. You have to sell sponsorships. You have to sell commercials. And if you're losing money, you can be fired. But the government's got no business in it, and the FCC was wrong to weigh in, and I'll fight any attempt by the government to get involved with speech. I will fight.
Good for them. Cruz and Paul are exactly right on this. I totally agree with them.
I'm glad I'm doing my lens on this because I have a lot to say, but I will respond to some of what you said. I think what the Trump administration is doing, it's like they're trying to just get rid of anybody that doesn't conform to the political speech that aligns with them. And it was even interesting and a step further that President Trump just last week started threatening to possibly revoke the licenses of broadcasters that say too many bad things. And I'm paraphrasing, but you know what he said, like, if you guys have seen him speaking about this, he was like, there's so much negativity about me. We need to revoke these licenses. And I think he's misunderstanding and misusing and often even considering abusing the government in ways, like you said, if private companies don't agree with it, that's fine. But the president should not be inserting himself on whether he's covered unfairly or not. Also, part of that coverage, which conservatives have complained about, bred a slew of conservative outlets that should be amazing for people that felt like there was lack of a voice to level the playing field. I mean, even Reason, where you work, Newsmax popped up in recent years. I mean, we're having multiple different outlets to provide.
Well, Democrats have tried to throttle all those. So that's
but they're here.
The blowback
they're
here is conservatives say, well, but Democrats try to get Newsmax taken off the air. They try to get Fox taken off the air.
And also with the FCC, I think it's just wholly wrong. So if you understand what the FCC is governing, they're looking at things like, are you running commercials to children? That's against the FCC rules. Is there indecency in the programming? Right. that's against the FCC rules. So no matter what you think about what Jimmy Kimmel
You and I
said,
had to familiarize ourselves with
I had
the
to
rules
read through
because
all of it.
We're on
yes, we
local
we went to
television
an actual we
We
went
had
to
to
an
do
actual
training.
seminar about it. But
we were given bars of soap and told to scrub out our mouths.
and we're also under a news division now, so we have to try to be accurate or attribute what we're saying. But with Jimmy Kimmel, people don't understand that he's under the entertainment division at ABC. So it's important to understand the differences between that. And even though he reports a lot of the news through his purview, he's still under the entertainment division. Right. So that's an important distinction.
He should be accountable to his viewers, accountable to the market. He's accountable to his bosses, to the network. The FCC needed not say anything about this matter. I wish they hadn't. But we'll discuss it more when it's time for Your Lens.
We will.
Next up, the president is speaking over the weekend. He did speak over the weekend, rather, at an emotional memorial service for Charlie Kirk. We'll be discussing all of that fascinating, very moving tribute to Charlie Kirk coming up next.